Hi guys, and welcome to All About the Philippines. Now there's no doubt that more and more men are looking for Filipinas as partners and potential wives than ever before. And we hear a lot of people on YouTube, including myself, that'll tell you how wonderful it is to be married to a Filipina or dating a Filipina, and how that has really changed their life, and how that relationship is far different to any other relationship they've ever had before in a much more positive way. But what we really don't hear about is the hardest things about dating a Filipina. Not all relationships come easy. In fact, most relationships with a Filipina will have difficulties involved. So in today's video, I want to explain to you what I believe the hardest things about dating a Filipina are, based on my own experience when I was dating my Filipina wife. But just before we jump into the video, be sure to check out my free Dating a Filipina course, which I've put in a playlist on my YouTube channel. Check it out for those that are looking to date a Filipina or are new to dating a Filipina. That 14-part course will take you from pre-dating a Filipina through to dating a Filipina and marrying a Filipina. I've given you over 3 hours of information and some of my very best tips around dating a Filipina, so be sure to check it out if you haven't already. Now, with that being said, let's jump straight into the video. The first thing that you're going to find, or most people might find, is actually when you're looking for a Filipina, it can be quite difficult to find that right Filipina for you. Because in that process, you're going to come across many women, and finding a true and genuine Filipina can sometimes be a big challenge. Now, most people are going to start looking at either Facebook groups where they might find Filipinas, or they might go to paid dating sites where they may find Filipinas there. And all these sites, they do have many scammers there trying to do love scams on you, not really interested in you to get your money. So that's going to be your first big challenge, or one of the hardest things about dating a Filipina is actually before you'll even date a Filipina, in finding the right one that's not out to scam you, and one who wants a genuine relationship with you. Now, for those of you that are looking to start your search with a online dating site, I can recommend Christian Filipina, and I'll put the link below. We've had many people in our community here on our All About the Philippines YouTube channel who have found great success through Christian Filipina. So check the link below, where you can view thousands of Filipina profiles for free. Now, after you've found your Filipina girlfriend, then some of the difficulties you can have might be things like communication with your Filipina. Now, while many Filipinas throughout the Philippines speak reasonable English or good English, they don't always understand what's being said. They don't always have the context of what you're saying and be able to make sense of it. And quite often they'll just nod their head and say they understand, when they don't really understand what you're saying. Now, this is not all the time, and it depends on your Filipina how well versed in English she is. Obviously, if she's been to university where they speak a lot of English, then she's probably not going to have so much problems with the communication side of things. But if you're with a Filipina who has been predominantly living in the province and they may not speak a lot of English, then this is certainly going to be an issue in that relationship, or one of the hardest things about dating a Filipina, especially in the early stages of that relationship. The next thing that can be quite challenging when dating a Filipina is around understanding her culture. Now, especially so if you're new to dating a Filipina or new to the Philippines, you really need to study up a bit on her culture and understand why they do things that they may do. Otherwise, you're going to be left quite perplexed by it all and wondering, what the hell is she doing this or that for? And I'll give you an example. While you're dating your Filipina, you might fly over to the Philippines and you could be having a great old time. You could be off on one of the tropical islands in a resort, enjoying the Philippines. And all of a sudden, she goes into this tampo mode. Now, you're wondering what tampo is? Well, it is simply a behavior that a Filipino will do where she'll go very, very quiet. She'll ignore you, withdraw her affection from you because she feels that you've done something to her that has upset her. You may not know what that is, and she will expect you to come up to her and apologize for whatever it is she thinks that you've done wrong, and she won't stop doing that really until you've made some sort of effort to apologize. Now, usually it might last a couple of hours, this tempo, where she's gone quiet and doesn't speak to you. But in some cases it can last days, and it can be quite confronting for a foreign man who's not used to a woman doing this sort of thing. And it is a cultural thing within the Philippines, because in a Filipina and Filipino relationship, that is a very acceptable thing for them to do. But where it changes is when it becomes a Filipina and a foreign relationship, then that's not okay in that relationship, because the relationship will suffer because of it. So when you see this for the first time, if you're not prepared for it, it can be quite difficult. And it can be a challenge within that relationship. And in some relationships, it does end up causing the relationship to end. So it is quite an important thing that you learn about tampo, what it is in a cultural sense to the Filipina. So when this happens, you can sit down and talk to her and work it out how the relationship is going to go forward, maybe without the tampo in it. Now, another thing I found quite difficult when I was dating my Filipina and we're doing the whole long distance relationship thing was that around my wife's work. Now, she had a pretty good job. She was in CCT security, and she would work 7 days a week, 12-hour days, and would get very little money in comparison to what we get here. But for her, it was a way of survival, of course, and she thought nothing at that time of working 12-hour days. And once every 2 weeks, she'd have to actually work a 24-hour shift. And the money she was getting was equal to about 300 Australian dollars per month. And by the time she would take out all her expenses, her rent, food, and sending money back to her family who were looking after her daughter at that time, it would leave her with very little money. And she was working so hard, and yet it became almost impossible to save money on that wage. So her life pretty much was centered around her work. She would go to work at 7 a.m. or start work at 7 a.m. She would finish at 7 p.m. By the time she would get home, it would be close on 9 o'clock in the evening, have dinner, go to bed, and do it all again. Now, don't get me wrong, she was very, very happy to have that job because that was her survival in the Philippines. But it was more about me sitting back and watching her work so long and hard, knowing that she's getting very little money for it. That was quite a difficult thing to sit back and watch from a male Western person's point of view. But the thing I probably found the most disturbing out of everything when I was dating my Filipina was where she was living. And it wasn't until my first visit to meeting her where I actually went and had a look at where she was living and saw firsthand for myself what it was actually like. And as I say, it was quite disturbing and it worried me a lot. She was living in a old boarding house in a single room. Now, you would walk into this old boarding house that would have tin roof on it. It was just wooden frame. You'd walk up these narrow stairs and you'd turn right and there'd be a long hallway and there'd be many single rooms off that hallway. Now, the place was a true fire hazard. If an electrical fault started in one of those rooms, everyone in there would be dead. There's no escape apart from that one narrow entrance, and the conditions in there were very hot. I remember going in there and after about 10 minutes I felt so claustrophobic and hot I had to get out of there. I just couldn't stay in there. And there's many of these types of boarding houses all over the Philippines where many Filipino people do live in. And some of them will have rats running through them and all sorts of things that are just really not healthy and a good place to be in. Now, this disturbed me so much that when I got back to Australia, I had a talk to my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and I said to her, look, you can't stay there anymore. That is such a dangerous place. It worries me. And I helped her to move into a apartment where I would help pay several thousand pesos a month so she could go and live in a much safer environment, and where I certainly wouldn't be worried anywhere near as much. Now, the last point I'd like to raise about the hardest things about dating a Filipina would be visiting the Philippines and then having to leave. So you've gone over there to visit, you spent maybe 2 or 3 weeks there, you've got a really good connection with the Filipina and your relationship is starting to sort of really go forward, and then all of a sudden it gets cut short because you've got to leave. You've got to go to the airport, you've got to say goodbyes, and that's all quite very difficult to do. You get back to your country and then all of a sudden you start to actually question yourself about the relationship, if it's what you really want, this long distance stuff, because it can be quite emotional. And when you're apart, the doubts can start creeping into your mind and you start to really question everything about the relationship. At times you can wonder to yourself if she really wants to be with you or you really want to be with her in this relationship. And it can be a real battle of the mind. So I say to people that when you come back from visiting her in the Philippines, try and get back there as soon as practical, as soon as possible. And that will help with a lot of those thoughts that keep creeping in, and it will help to cement your relationship even more. And just remember that a lot of those thoughts that you have and those doubts that you have when you're doing the long distance relationship, they can be very natural. It's a natural thing to have those thoughts. So be aware of that and stay strong. So guys, they're my thoughts around some of the hardest things about dating a Filipina. I'd like to hear what you believe was some of the hardest things that you've come across when you dated your Filipina. So if you can put those in the comments below, that'd be fantastic. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed the video, give it a big thumbs up. Share the video with all your networks, and of course subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on the notification bell to get more videos. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I appreciate all your support. Take care and bye for now.